Imagine loading a 30-ton tank using nothing but wooden ramps, steel cables, brute force, and hope. No modern cranes. No hydraulic lifts. No safety protocols. In 1944, the Allies had to move thousands of tanks across oceans, railroads, roads, beaches, and bridges, and every single step was dangerous. Today, you'll discover the real methods soldiers used to load massive machines of war, and why even a single mistake could crush an entire crew in seconds. In 1944, the world needed to get Sherman, Churchill, Cromwell, Pershing, and other tanks to the front lines as quickly as possible. To do this, the Allies needed to ship them by sea, transport them on railways, unload them on beaches, unload them from LSTs, landing craft, tankers, move them along makeshift roads. And all this with extreme haste. The war was won not only by those who had the most tanks, but by those who could move them the fastest. 1. Wooden ramps plus steel girders. The Allies used reinforced wooden ramps, dangerously inclined. The tank needed to ascend with engine at maximum power, wet track, real risk of sliding and falling into the water. 2. The dock crane gamble. When available, they used dock cranes. But there was a problem. They were made for general cargo, not for 30-ton tanks. Real cases describe cables breaking, tanks falling from 10 meters high, deck being destroyed by impact. Fortunately, it almost always worked. 3. The crew inside the tank. Yes, there were soldiers inside the tank while it was being loaded. What if the crane failed? They would die instantly crushed. 1. The suicide ramp technique. 2 narrow ramps were placed on the track. The driver had to perfectly align the tracks. If he was off by 10 centimeters, the tank would tip over and crush anyone nearby. 2. The chalk block team soldiers placed wooden blocks as makeshift brakes. They had seconds to stop the tank before it rolled forward. One mistake equals disaster. 3. Securing the load. The tank was tied down with heavy chains, wooden wedges, manual locks. All done by hand, in rain, mud, and bombardment. Beach landings, the most dangerous loading of all, 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock. Here, the tank needed to be loaded onto a special ship, the famous LST's landing ship tank, before sailing to Europe. 1. Driving into the LST, the tank entered via the front ramp. Problem: this ramp swayed with the waves. Soldiers describe, you were driving a 30-ton tank on something that felt like a trampoline. 2. The tank clutch dance. The driver needed to advance, stop a line, adjust the tracks. All without visibility, in the dark, in the noise of the engine, with the ship shaking. 3. Tanks packed like sardines. Inside the LST, tanks were, side by side, tied down, braced by steel bars. If a chain were to break during the journey, a tank could crush other tanks and the crew. This happened more than once. 1944 includes the most dangerous phase, Normandy and Italy. Unloading a tank under enemy fire required absurd courage. 1. Mud plus water equals nightmare tanks would get stuck in the mud as they left the ship's ramp. Soldiers had to dig, push, use planks. Pray the engine wouldn't die. 2. Running engines inside the LST engines were left running for hours. This created unbearable heat, toxic smoke, deafening noise. It was like working inside an oven. 3. Snipers aiming for the driver Nazis knew that, without a driver, the tank becomes scrap metal. Many landings were made under direct fire. In 1944, roads were destroyed, bridges were improvised, and tanks needed to be carried for quick crossings. 1. Portable Bailey bridges. Soldiers built modular bridges in 90 minutes. Then, they had to guide tanks across them. A Bailey bridge could support a Sherman, but only if it was perfectly assembled. 2. The battlefield lift without cranes, soldiers used manual jacks, tree trunks, levers, absolute improvisation. Yes, they lifted parts of the tank by hand to change tracks. 3. Winch and cable systems in mountainous areas. Tanks were pulled by cables, M31 tractors, other tanks. The risk was enormous. The cable could snap, the tank could slide, the crew could be crushed. Today, we remember the tanks, the battles, the generals. But we rarely remember the soldiers who carried these machines. Men who drove tanks on unstable ramps, risked their backs to align tracks, breathed toxic fumes, transported 30-ton machines to another continent. All this without modern equipment. They proved that war is not won only by those who shoot, but by those who manage to move the war